Taste the challenge, the power of radio control. If you can't take it, you'll eat dust. Radio controlled ProAm only from Nintendo. Now you're playing with power.
Welcome back to Classic Gaming Quarterly TV. When I was a kid, RC ProAm was one of my favorite games, and it wouldn't be a stretch to call it a definitive title on the Nintendo Entertainment System. But what you may not know is it was actually only the first in a 4-game franchise spanning 3 different consoles. Or you may have already known that, in which case you don't need to watch this. When I was a kid, radio control cars were really popular. Without fail, every year on Christmas morning, you'd hear tons of them zipping up and down the streets of my neighborhood. But we always wondered, how could we enjoy RC cars without having to go outside, and without our mothers yelling at us for driving them in the house? Well, in 1988, Rare answered that question by releasing RC ProAm on the NES. In the game, you race against other radio control cars while picking up various upgrades, giving your car more grip, better acceleration, and a higher top speed. Running over speed boosters, represented by red arrows, gives your car a temporary burst of extra speed. You also have to avoid puddles of both oil, which could spin you off the track into a temporary crash, and water, which will simply slow you down. Somehow both seem to magically end up laying right on the racing line. The game also mixes in some vehicular combat elements in the form of missiles and bombs. Who among us as kids didn't wish that our RC car could freaking shoot missiles? Heck, I'm 37 and I still daydream about my car being able to fire missiles when I'm stuck in traffic. Anyway, you can only have one or the other, and missiles which you shoot forward are far more preferable as you can use them to take out a car that you're trying to catch. Or if you're in last place at the end of a race, you can just fire off a volley of them in a last act of desperation. Finally, you want to try and collect all the lettered tiles which allow you to spell out the word Nintendo. Doing so upgrades all the cars to a higher, faster class, and you start the process of powering up your car all over again. If you're playing the game for high score, you'll obviously want to finish first in every race. As if this wasn't already difficult enough once the tracks get more challenging, a quote-unquote feature in the game periodically allows the hated orange car to attain some kind of super speed boost that leaves the rest of the cars in the dust. The only way to hold it at bay and still win the race yourself is to shoot it with a missile every time it passes you by. If, on the other hand, you're just trying to keep playing the game with no thought to your score or results, you need only to avoid coming in last, as that is the only way to end your game. RC ProAm really separated itself from other driving games of its era with a unique isometric perspective and tight responsive controls. And while other racing games of the day have become largely forgettable as more advanced games have been released to take their place, RC ProAm remains just as fun today as it was the day it came out. Three years later, Super RC ProAm was released on Nintendo's wildly popular Game Boy system. I'm not sure what's so super about it, but it's a perfectly respectable sequel to the original game, and the fact that it's on a portable system just makes it more awesome. This game is a sequel and not just a port, so all the tracks and cars are new rather than being carried over from the previous game. Probably the coolest upgrade to this second installment is something that I didn't even get a chance to check out. Using a Game Boy Link cable, you can play 2-player games against a friend, or an enemy. Multiplayer RC ProAm can be a great way to settle disputes. Even better, using the Game Boy 4-player adapter, you can play with up to 3 other people, settling gangland disputes in style. Technically, the game runs about as expected on the Game Boy. It's not as fast or as smooth as its big brother on the NES, but for a Game Boy game, it plays quite well. Both the upgrades and weapon systems are exactly the same. Again, there are 3 other drivers on the track, and your goal is simply to not finish last if you want to keep racing. Super RC ProAm is certainly not as polished as its predecessor, but the convenience of its portability more than makes up for it. In 1993, Championship Pro-Am was released on the Sega Genesis, marking the first and only time that the franchise would make an appearance on a non-Nintendo console. Unlike Super RC Pro-Am, Championship Pro-Am is not a sequel, but rather a direct 16-bit remake of the original NES game. It's funny how people complain when a game company quote-unquote cashes in by re-releasing an older game on a newer console. I don't hear anyone whining about older movies being re-released on Blu-ray. The upgrade of this game from an 8 to a 16-bit platform is apparent in both its sound and its visuals. The game is strikingly more colorful, and while the soundtrack uses the same tunes, they're redone taking advantage of the increased musical capability of the Genesis. There are now a total of 6 cars on track instead of 4, but you still need to come in 3rd place or better in order to continue on to the next race. If you don't own the original RC Pro-Am, but you do own a Genesis, you may want to pick this one up instead of the NES version, as the audiovisual upgrades make it a better game. The final game in the franchise, RC Pro-Am 2, was released in 1993 on the NES, making it the only sequel in the series to appear on a home console. The game is a significant upgrade in the gameplay department with a deeper upgraded weapon system and varied environments. In this game, you no longer pick up vehicle upgrades on track. In fact, with the exception of a few random items, 1-ups and letter tiles, the only things you pick up on the track are bottles of nitrous oxide with which to give yourself a speed boost, and money, which you use between races to upgrade your vehicle and buy weapons. Speaking of upgrades, you can upgrade both your engine and your tires to improve on-track performance. There are several levels of each, ranging in price from a couple $1,000s for an entry-level tire upgrade to $50,000 for the top-level engine upgrade. The weapon system has also been expanded to include some new items. Still present are the bombs and missiles, but new to the game are buckshot, which causes your target to drop money, the laser, which is really just a missile that can knock out more than one car, the freeze shot, which causes cars to momentarily freeze on the track, and the Mega Pulse, which is supposed to be some kind of super weapon, but just seemed to me to be a really slow-moving missile. Instead of spelling Nintendo, you now spell RC Pro-Am 2 to access more advanced cars. But unlike previous versions of the game in which all racers got the new car once you'd collected all the letters, now each racer must spell out the word on their own, meaning that not all racers will be driving the same car at the same time, providing a distinct advantage to players with better cars. On-track hazards and obstacles make a return as well, and familiar non-favorite puddles and oil slicks are joined by undulations, bombs, and airplanes that either bomb or strafe the track. I found both the bombs and the planes to be particularly infuriating. Often placed right before the finish line, bombs can turn a first-placed finish into a last-placed game over, and the weaving required to dodge fire from overhead planes always caused me to drop back from the pack. As was the case with the Game Boy release, one of the coolest things about this game was again something that I was unable to test. RC ProAm 2 is compatible with the Nintendo 4-score adapter, thereby allowing 4-player simultaneous play. I really need to find some friends, and a 4-score adapter. RC ProAm 2 is widely considered to be the best game in the series. I can't disagree on a technical level, but the original will always be my favorite, probably due to nostalgia. If, however, you're new to the franchise, you really owe it to yourself to give all 4 games a try. RC ProAm 2 was an extremely popular series in its day, and the franchise is in desperate need of a reboot on a modern console.